Welcome to the Trumpet of the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
When we look at the unrest that has been sweeping over the world and our nation as a whole, we find that various nations seem to be trying to kill each other or fall apart. The there has been many conflicts in the Middle East. Would you like to comment on that, Robert?
With the many conflicts in the Middle East? Well, first I would like to comment on the fact that we are actually in the process of ending a conflict in the Middle East. And that being said, in spite of that, there has been an uptick in terrorist attacks in Afghanistan, but I don't think that justifies us staying. There are going to be terrorist attacks regardless. Might as well not put our necks on the line when we really have no point in.
Well, the most recent one was where they used a car bomb in front of a school and blew up girls. I think it was in the 30 or 40 girls.
I thought that was a school bus, but yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. But over on the western side of the Middle East, Israel's having problems, right?
You know, thinking about it, and a step back to the previous one, it's amazing how many of these countries seem to forget how valuable females are to their population. Like, the Chinese forgot
It's kind of
about
hard
it,
to have
and
a
now they're facing
population.
a population crisis.
Well,
the Japanese put too much importance on males. Now they're having a population crisis. The Middle East puts way too much importance on males, and they're having a crisis. Well, a lot of crisis.
Think about it though. It's religious for them.
Yeah, but from a logical standpoint, right? You can repopulate a large amount of the population with a much smaller amount of males than you need females.
That is
just
true.
Just logistically speaking.
Now, if Japan and China really want to work on their population crisis, there are a variety of ways they can do that, most of which are unethical.
Well, Japan is already doing some interesting things. Like, did you know that they're allowing people to immigrate on breeding visas? I'm not even joking.
I didn't know that.
All right, so forget mail order brides. You desperate men. Just go pick up your bride in Japan, and
China's method is a bit different.
Well, actually, Japan, and their problem is they're producing fewer people than are dying.
Well, yeah, but most civilized countries are producing fewer people than are dying. Especially with the pandemic, the U.S. repopulation rate plummeted.
Well,
and it shouldn't have. It should have actually increased.
Well, and it probably would have if it wasn't for the propensity of abortion clinics.
Well, not just that. People just aren't having kids. I remember seeing an article fairly deep into the pandemic that said that 1 in 3 roommates, so these are non-married people, had slept together. Which is not good. It should be 0. But I couldn't help but thinking, wow, that's actually really low. All things considered. Because think about it. A lot of these states had total lockdowns They were rigid and they were about as rigid as you could be. These people had to see each other all the time, and only one in three. It's like people can't stand the sight of each other anymore.
Well, actually, it's they according to a recent thing study, they've found that millennial females are running into problems because of the fact that because of their staunch feminist position, they can't get boyfriends.
And the
And
boyfriends
the
they can
few
get, they don't want.
right, and the ones they can get, they don't want. Because the ones they can get are the beta males or the male feminists, which are predators.
But then, even if so, in America, people aren't. They're not having sex as often, and when they do, you've got the tons and tons of abortion clinics that we have. So if you get pregnant and you don't want it, and most people don't want it, not realizing that they're actually just killing our society.
I mean, on top of that, you've got how many different forms of birth control?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
You've got pills, you've got
Uh,
injections, you've got inserts, you've got
though
whatever
it
category
has been
condoms fall into.
stated that that the decline of morality and the reduction of and the increase in women being seen as objects, it can be directly traced to this feminist movement and the 1960s and the free love generation.
Well, it's fascinating that
They did it to themselves.
modern day feminists view objectification as something to be attained. Well, something to be obtained. They want to be objectified for some reason, but then complain when people objectify them.
They want to be objectified, but they don't want to be treated like objects. And when you're objectified, that's exactly what you're going to be treated like, is like objects. That's what the word means.
And then all the guys are just like, "Wow, you people are really overcomplicating this. We're just gonna be over here."
On a
Well,
semi-related
men don't
topic,
like
that
being
is,
treated like dirt.
on a semi-related topic, I believe there was a hospital in Canada that reported no new baby had been named Karen since August of 2019,
Well,
which
I could
was
see that.
amusing.
Getting back over to the Middle East's birth rates are not going down despite how they treat their women.
Well,
That's because they know they need children.
when you can legally rape your women, of
Now, I
course your
grant
birth
you
rates aren't going to
that.
go down.
I don't think abortion's legal in most Middle Eastern
That's
countries.
not. Well, I didn't say abortion. I said when you can legally
Well,
rape
you're
them.
No, no, I said and I don't think.
Oh, okay.
So on top of that, I don't think so. They get raped, get
well, that's
pregnant,
true.
and they can't. So they're of course
And you're allowed
birth
seven
rate's not
wives.
going down.
Yeah.
But
And
I mean,
of course, the women don't get any choice of who they get married to.
there's that third world mentality that is really good that we just don't. That most first world countries don't have, and that's have babies. That's how you survive. For some reason, people are taught that babies are a hindrance.
Now, thing about it, you've got the third world proclivity towards having lots of babies, but they also have the proclivity for having lots of violence and war. After all, look at all the terrorist organizations
Why do you think they have to have lots of babies?
Dad froze up.
Quick, get a blowtorch. We'll unfreeze him.
This may have been the doing of Medusa.
So how much do you think the basilisk myth was influenced by Medusa?
It's hard to say, because between the basilisk and the cockatrice, they're very, very specific. Like, one is a rooster's egg that is hatched by a snake. Yes, a rooster's egg. And the other one is a snake's egg that is hatched by a chicken. Specifically, a rooster. So,
See,
you're already going against the natural order for either one to exist.
yeah, but I constantly hear conflating between cockatrice and basilisk.
Yeah. But while Medusa was supposedly not technically petrifying, more as she was literally, there was no magic involved with Medusa. She was just so ugly you would turn into stone if you looked at her. That was how it was worded. No magic involved.
Even after her head was cut off.
Yeah, even after her head was cut off. Which, technically speaking, after it started rotting, would make her even uglier. So it might even be more efficient.
But like I was saying before, my internet connection crashed. But with 1,000 rockets being fired into Israel, and then Israel's response, because Israel doesn't just take getting shot at.
No, and they shouldn't.
You know they're losing a lot of people over there.
Yeah.
And then Iran, besides Hamas, is basically Iran, is what it is. It's an arm of the Iran military attacking Israel, and then the Houthi in Yemen are another arm of the Iranian military, and they're attacking the Saudis using drones and missiles. And the U.S. Navy just took and captured an unmarked ship that was not sailing an ensign, that was loaded up with weapons made in China and Russia, headed to Yemen to the terrorists.
For those who don't know, in sailing talk, an ensign is a flag. So they weren't flying the flag of a country they were from, which is basically an open invitation to any military to pull them over from any country. Because those are probably smugglers. A smart smuggler would have a lot of flags on their ship and fly whichever one was appropriate. These were not smart smugglers.
No, they weren't smart. As it turned out, the ship was just loaded down with weapons. But when they tracked it back, the logs showed they were from Iran.
So not only were they a smuggling ship, that was too dumb to fly a flag of a country, they were also dumb enough to keep accurate logs.
Or keep logs at all.
According to the intelligence bureaus that the news have reported from, the majority of the weapons going to the terrorist organizations in that part of the world are coming from China, Russia, and Iran. And being Iran gets all its weapons from China and Russia, basically it's all coming from China and Russia.
Iran is just the distributor.
I never have understood Russia's weird connection with Iran. Because it's been around since, what, the 70s?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a foothold in the Middle East. They want to get a strong position of power in the Middle East so that they can help control the the gas, well, the oil that is, and thus control the oil prices. Because right now their economy is almost entirely based on oil. So much
Yeah, and so is
so
ours.
that yes, and so much so that a group of Russian terrorists have taken over an American oil pipeline and are holding it hostage.
Now, an interesting thing about those terrorists is they claim that they're just in it for the money and not for political purposes, which admittedly can, whether or not we can believe them is an entirely different story. They also haven't successfully taken the pipeline completely.
They're demanding an enormous sum of money.
Doesn't mean they'll get it.
And it would be cheaper for the oil companies just to ship the oil by truck than to pay them.
If I recall correctly, um, the mandatory driving, the mandatory limit of the hours that a trucker is allowed to drive has actually been raised slightly just to accommodate the transport of oil more effectively during this
Ah,
time.
so another year for truckers to make bank. Because at the beginning of the pandemic, that's what was
Yeah.
happening.
Another year for truckers to make bank, just a slightly different group of truckers.
Mhm. So when you take and you look at it, okay, a they Biden says, "Oh well, they're a private company. They can. It's up to them whether or not they choose to pay the these people or not. We will not get involved. Oil is a national security issue."
Whatever happened, we do not negotiate with terrorists.
That
Well,
was Reagan.
I gotta play on the other side of the fence. This is a spectacular example of flip flopping because in most other situations, Biden would have been government intervention, and now suddenly he's not.
Yes, but he's taken a stand against oil anyway.
Yeah, but he is right. It is a private company. It is their choice whether or not they pay the terrorists. It's not the government's problem. Just
Unless
because,
they can blow the oil pipeline like they claim they can.
oh, if they can, then that's a problem. Yeah,
And you can't really
that
do that with software.
no, you really can't.
And this is
No,
a
you can't.
It's an empty threat, is what it is.
Unless they
Unless
have
they've got
agents on the
charge.
ground.
Yeah,
it would
in which
be
case the government would need to get involved for that.
it would be easier just to go through, reformat all the hard drives that are running everything on the servers, disconnect it from the network, so that you can reformat everything and reestablish everything, and then just change your passwords.
Yeah,
This isn't a hard process to overcome.
No, in fact, you encrypt it and the process ahead of time to where it's harder to get into.
Yeah, and because this is an oil refinery, it's not exactly like the servers that are running these things have a lot of personal information that can be weaponized. This this is really a non-issue. If they rehack you after you change everything, then you just change your passwords again because the most they can do is turn on and off your pumps.
Yeah, there should be a way to turn them on and off manually.
Yeah,
The thing about it is this shutdown pipeline has already made gas prices across the entire United States to go above $3 a gallon, and in the West Coast over $4 a gallon.
except here for some reason hasn't hit $3 a gallon here.
Not here, no. Probably because we're closer to the refineries.
You are a lot closer to the refineries.
uh, but that's
I don't just like my oil fine. I like it refine.
Now, on that topic, mild segue, because this is going to be totally unrelated to everything. Who in their right mind decided, yeah, we've got these beans here. I'm going to fry them. And you know what? That's not good enough. I'm going to fry them again. And then I'm going to stick them in a can and sell them to people. Because people are going to like their beans refried.
and actually they're not fried twice.
Then why is it called refried beans?
Because it's false advertisement.
What they do is they take and boil them. And then when they get soft, they mash them, season them, then fry them, then can.
So
They're
it's
called
not refried
refried
beans at all.
because they were fried after they were cooked.
They're not actually refried beans. It's like I've said. When I'm older, I probably won't be able to say that I'm retired because that would imply that I ever stopped being tired in the first place.
Well, your great granddad used to say he was retarded when he took and retired.
He slowed down.
He slowed down. He never quit working. He just slowed down.
I think that kind of runs in the family of just never quitting working. How many times did Granddad try to retire? And he just never got around to it?
He did for a short period of time.
Yeah, and then he went right back to work because he got bored. All this, and he never actually stopped working on his house either.
Well, they say you live longer by not by if you keep doing something.
Well, that didn't help him any.
True, but your great granddad lived to be 85.
Fair. Oh, I just know that if I ever live that long, I don't think I could ever stop working either. I'd get restless.
Well, they've done studies that show that people tend to die quick if they totally stop.
Mm-hmm. That's why most of them start traveling the world if they've got the money for it.
Mm,
And if they don't, then they probably never stopped working.
yeah. But then again, the Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat, which is something that the socialists are determined to undo. Because after all, uh, Kamala Harris is pushing for er, a living wage for everyone, whether they're working or not.
You know what happens when you have a capitalist system and a universal basic income? It's as though that universal basic income doesn't exist.
Yes. And there's also the situation where if you've got at a universal basic income, then the prices of everything goes up.
Which
Inflation.
is
We're
what
already
Robert
facing inflation.
was alluding to when he said that it's as if that living wage doesn't exist.
Yeah, it was.
And another problem is they want to take and socialize medicine. You know what happens with socialized medicine?
Mexico.
Yes, but there's also things like Canada,
Where
where
the taxes skyrocket.
where they are arresting preachers and dragging them off to jail because they hold church service.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with socialized medicine.
Ah, but their laws are set up the way it is. They're using their medical system to justify their regulations in order to stop people from doing what they don't want them doing. It's okay for them to do what they want them to do, but not okay for them to do what they don't want them to do. And church is one of the big ones they don't want them to do. And you cannot tell me that if they get socialized medicine, that they're not going to take and declare or church as a danger to society. Cars will be too,
Oh, they've been
after
trying
all.
to. They've been trying to claim that churches are a danger to society for years now.
Hmm. Yet statistics show the opposite. Now, I'll agree that some churches are a danger to society. Some of
Mormons.
these cults.
Ah, got something caught in my throat there.
Islam. There's a lot of that, but Christianity is not dangerous to society, and never has been.
In fact, there was a time that it was the foundation of this society.
Hmm. But that's just it. It's the foundation of this society. That's why the left wants it removed. Because if they can't remove Christianity from the society, they cannot establish a communist state. Because for one thing, Christianity teaches to look after each other, and it also teaches to take and love each other, and you cannot and not to envy and covet. And communism is based on coveting and envying people. You can't get one group of people to turn on another unless they're coveting and envying them. All these lies about white privilege um their and the evil of the rich man are all based on envy and coveting.
You know, this is slightly off topic, but it's related enough that I want to put it in. Where I work, there is this common thing where they try to impress their ideals on their workers. And one of these is integrity. And the way they define integrity has been bothering me for a while. When I first got the job, it didn't bother me as much because I wasn't paying attention as closely. But they define it as doing the right thing even when no one's watching. That's not the definition of integrity. Integrity is doing the right thing even when the wrong thing would be easier, more convenient, and benefit you more.
Okay, I'll agree with that definition, but I'll also agree that if you're not doing the right thing when nobody else is watching, you still don't have any integrity.
Yes, but if you're doing the right thing when nobody else is watching because it is the easier method or because it works better for you, that is not a test of your integrity.
No.
So what?
It,
What? Your issue is a matter of spin here, not a matter of actual definition.
both. Yes, because whether or not someone is watching is irrelevant to integrity. So the fact that it is being used as the core of the definition bothers me. Someone could be watching you do the wrong thing, and it wouldn't change anything, just as someone watching you do the right thing doesn't mean anything. Someone not watching you do the right or wrong thing also doesn't matter for integrity, other than the fact that it is one of the features that would make doing the right thing easier or more convenient. That's the core principle there is if the wrong thing is easier, more convenient, or would benefit you more than doing the right thing, then it's a test of your integrity.
Yes.
But in reality, the core root of integrity is doing the right thing.
Yes.
That's the key.
But like I said, it's not hard to do the right thing when the right thing would benefit you.
The thing about the argument comes down to the fact that without a basis for what is right and wrong, how can there be integrity?
Well, obviously the right thing in the definition that is being used is what they want you to do.
Yes, and that wouldn't
That's the
necessarily be the right
unspoken
thing.
caveat. But
Yeah, like I said though, that wouldn't necessarily be the right thing, depending on
but
what they want you to do.
my problem with the way my work is trying to spin it though is that they don't care if it's objectively the right thing or the wrong thing. They want you to do what they tell you is the right thing even when no one is watching. They
Yeah.
they don't care if it's actually the right thing. They just want it to be the easy, more convenient, and will benefit you more thing.
Now, one of the things that when I was in the Navy, and I grant you that's a long time ago, the one of the things that they kept harping on is that we were to only obey legal orders. If it wasn't a lawful order, we were not to obey it, no matter who gave it. But you know what people's natural tendencies are. When they're used to following orders, they follow all orders, whether they're right or wrong. And with the way our society has gotten, there are a lot of things that are being put forward by our government that when I was in would not have been considered a lawful order. And if you don't obey it, they kick you out. While when I was in, they would have brought the person giving the order up on charges. So we live in a society that wants to throw the rules out because it isn't the truth they want. It they don't they're working off of a situational morality that varies from person to person and place to place. And whenever you do that, you have no morality. There has to be absolute rights and wrongs, or you have no thing to base integrity or morality on without the absolute. And
I
they don't believe in absolutes.
I will slightly disagree with you there because there is an absolute right or wrong under that. It's whoever wins, whoever has the most firepower, whoever is
My
strongest. That is who dictates what is right or wrong.
But that can change like the wind with their mood.
That can change like the wind and their mood, but it is the absolute of strength. It is
you ever seen
Darwinism in its purest form.
you ever seen a dictator when they're in power?
Well, that's one of the
The right and wrong does change like the wind, and everybody's terrified of it.
when you look at look at Chaz. They took it and claimed that
I cannot
there was
hear
no
that
laws.
name and keep a straight face. I just
Would
think
you
of
rather be
this.
called Chop?
I just think of this surfer dude who's who's probably fresh out of his oh man, I almost said sorority fraternity hazing.
Oh, anymore. It might have been a sorority.
True.
But yeah, I think Cher's daughter changed her name to something like that when she decided to become a guy instead of a girl. But in the Chaz, there were supposed to be no rules, total freedom. Absolute anarchy. It had been run by a group of thugs with guns, and murders went wild, rapes went wild, theft went unchecked. It was a dog eat dog situation. And that's what the left wants for our society.
There is a reason why they're trying to take away everyone's guns. Because when they are the only ones with guns, they are the ones with power. And therefore, their morality becomes absolute.
The problem with that theory is IED.
Well, I said that's why they want to be the only ones with the guns.
Yes, but still, you take away everybody's guns. You realize that the largest school massacre by a single individual took place in Germany after they took and outlawed guns and was done with a homemade flamethrower.
I thought that was Russia.
No, that
Russia was a terrorist organization that did
t-
their largest school massacre.
that's the largest school massacre in history in Russia, but that was a organization that wasn't an individual.
Okay.
And they most definitely had guns.
Yes, but the one that took place in with an individual who killed the most people of any individual school attack was done in Germany by a single individual with a homemade flamethrower. If a person can make a homemade flamethrower and kill that many people, gun control is not going to stop them.
Well, of course not. But that doesn't stop them from trying. And
And the majority,
to quote Men in Black in this one, a person is intelligent. People are stupid. A
yes,
person can build a homemade flamethrower and massacre people if he's motivated enough and intelligent enough. People as a whole will be herded like cattle.
back in an interview back in the 2000 teens, they interviewed the guy who took and invented the Liberator plastic firearms that you can download and print it on a 3D printer. And this is, well, I take it back. It was just before Trump got elected. So that but they were interviewing him, and he was said that his biggest selling item was a milling machine that was set up with the computer programs to produce this 70% and uppers for AR-15. You turn on the computer, put the block of aluminum in it, and it would sit there and after it finished, you would have a AR-15 upper.
Upper receiver?
Yeah, the part that has the serial number,
Okay.
because you can buy all the rest of the parts.
So, for those who don't know a lot about guns, there you usually have like a receiver on a gun. Most rifles, or at least most modern rifles, are broken down into an upper and lower receiver. The lower receiver part is usually where your magazine initially slots into, while your upper receiver does all the action of actually loading the individual round.
And in this particular case, the lower receiver or is just set there and made just make just like if you bought one, except without serial number.
Mm-hmm.
Buy the machine, and you could sit there and just pump them out. And then you can buy all the rest of the parts on the open market. And in the United States currently, it's not illegal. It's illegal to sell them, but it's not illegal to own one, and it's not illegal to take
Is
and
it
make
even
them.
illegal to sell it if you put a serial number on it?
If you put a serial number, it's not even illegal to sell it. But if you don't put a serial number, you can give them away.
And even then, it's a serial number and related to what? The manufacturer. If you're the
Hmm.
manufacturer, your serial number can mean literally anything. And on top
Yeah,
of that, you don't even have to have them recorded.
yeah.
All the serial number does is say that you originally created the firearm.
And there's several different firearms that are now 3D printable.
Yeah.
Several is an underestimation. There are a lot.
Yeah, I don't know how good all of them are though. Most of the best ones are only 9 millimeter. Though I did see a person use do a 3D printed AK-47, but it didn't last long.
It's the problem with running almost entirely on plastic.
It wore the plastic to where the metal rails the slide was sliding on lost their alignment, so it jammed. But the fact that it probably went through most of a full magazine and a half before it did it, you could still do a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm.
And he stated he was going to figure out a way to fix that.
So, this part is going to get cut. In fact, I'm just going to pause the recording briefly.
When we take and we look at all the government regulations, and yet society is still degenerating and still collapsing. We still have the riots. We still have them taking over sections of towns. And that's here in the United States. But overseas, it's even getting worse. Some of the generals in France suggested a coup to take over the country. They're having violent protests in Colombia.
In fact, we've covered not a small number of the violent protests that have happened worldwide just since we started
That's
this
true.
show, and we haven't even been going for a
Hmm.
year yet. We're getting pretty close,
No,
That's true.
really.
but we haven't even gone for a year yet.
But it only seems to be accelerating. You've got the U.S. You've got us. I don't know how much in Australia, but I know they've had some. I'm pretty sure they've had some civil unrest. Britain's had similar
So is
stuff.
Canada
The
and
U.S.
France and Germany and
and
Italy,
now Israel. Because
Israel,
Israel, on top of the attacks, is also there have been riots.
Colombia, Beirut, uh, that one place that I can't think of the name of.
China's having riots.
Montenegro.
Yeah, Montenegro.
Montenegro actually solved their problem, so they ousted their dictator.
Well, technically, so did Myanmar, but they got another one to replace him. Her.
Military coups happen. Not always good.
Well, they
They've
took and
having
went
some
from a
unrest. No, I forgot. A
they
lot of
went
people
from
have
a
died in Myanmar.
in Myanmar they took and went from a communist dictator to a military dictator.
But something like last I saw the numbers, it was about 800 dead in Burma.
Hmm.
We live in interesting times.
And it seems like things aren't slowing down.
Well, China is taking and trying to negotiate between countries. Is offering one country some disputed land that they're claiming in order to take uh, disputed land from India, which is another country. It's totally insane.
Yeah, but since when did China ever do things logically?
Oh, kind of like they're claiming that the entire South China Sea is Chinese territory.
Yeah. But let's be honest, if they thought they could get away with it, they would claim the entire world as their territory.
Yes, they would. Yes, they would. But what they're using, it's kind of interesting. They're taking and persecuting every religious group in in China if they don't worship the leaders of the Communist Party. And yet their justification for claiming the South China Sea is that one of the Chinese gods, that is supposed to be his sacred land, is the South China Sea. So they're saying because that belongs to a Chinese god, it's ours.
Under that argument, the entirety of the Mediterranean would belong to the Greeks.
The Italians would definitely dispute that.
Yeah, but the Romans had a knack for stealing other people's gods.
Yeah, that's true.
The Romans also had a knack for being very bad at naval engagements.
True.
And see, Rome would just say that everybody was theirs, that the whole world was theirs.
Yes, they
Yeah.
would. And they'd take it by force.
So would the Macedonians.
It's almost like that's a common theme in history.
Yeah, it's almost like that's the modus operandi of conquerors.
Hmm.
Just China hasn't been very good at that because they haven't started conquering.
They were going. I was watching a video recently where they were going through why not to take and invade the United States, and they completely overlooked one reason that was stated at the end during World War II. A foreign general stated in World War II that he would not invade the United States because there was a gun behind every blade of grass.
And then they went and invaded the United States.
And look how that turned out for them.
Yeah.
But that was still his reasons why they shouldn't do it. Yes, they went ahead and bombed Pearl Harbor anyway. But
Which, if I recall correctly, Admiral Yamamoto was staunchly against.
yes, he was.
Lobbied very heavily to try to avoid that. He was
Yeah,
right.
he said it would be very bad to wake the sleeping dragon.
And it was. And while the Pacific War was brutal, if you look at the numbers, we mopped the floor with them.
Hmm.
You know what's the worst thing to come out of World War II, though?
What?
The first usage of the fax machine.
I was thinking to Dotson.
The first usage, the first usage that I am aware of the fax machine was to transmit a copy through the U.S. Navy of the surrender documents from Germany.
Okay.
Now, it may have been used on a
Mm.
smaller scale before that, but that was the first real usage that of something important that I'm aware of official documents.
See, I didn't even know the fax machine existed yet at that point.
I stumbled into the little factoid while researching something completely different.
That would have been really cutting edge back then.
Yes, it would have been. Very.
Well,
Especially when you figure the Xerox didn't come out until the 60s.
at the same time, I happened to stumble into the little detail that the first transmission of a radio signal from ship to shore and vice versa happened in the 1800s.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome.
Because Marconi took and invented the radio in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't long before it was they started figuring out ways to use it for replacing the telegraph so they wouldn't have to use wires across the ocean.
And you know what they settled on? They settled on using it for the telegraph by using a continuous wave signal.
Mhm.
Um, but part of the reason for that, and I found out this recently, that until around World War II, they believed that any radio signal above 1.5 gigahertz was completely worthless for communications purposes. No, not even
Well, they
gigahertz, it
didn't
was
have.
megahertz.
I was going to say gigahertz. They didn't have anything that could give an oscillator that could
Yeah,
enable them to translate that.
it was megahertz. Now, to put this in perspective, 3 to 30 megahertz is the high frequency range, also called HF. 300 to 3 kilohertz is the medium frequency range that we use for radio, as in the type you listen to in your car.
Hmm.
While 30 to 300 kilohertz is the low frequency range that originally was used to communicate with satellites. And in in really high latitudes that were that didn't have a strong enough atmosphere to hold in the normal frequency ranges.
It also works underwater,
Yes, it also works underwater.
which is something that most with higher frequencies won't do. Is won't work underwater.
Although primarily VLF was used underwater at the time. Although from my understanding VLF has almost been entirely replaced.
Well, when you think about the fact that a submarine and used to have to surface to receive messages,
Yes.
they don't anymore. So, and that's because they changed frequencies that would actually penetrate and get there.
Yeah.
The technology's done wonderful things since the World War II. But
And
well, if it wasn't for technology, we couldn't even do this broadcast.
to uh, to put another piece into perspective, satellite internet that those two over there have been struggling with because of the weather functions at either SHF or EHF, which is about, let's see, if I recall correctly, that would be 3 to 300 gigahertz if you were to cover both spectrums.
Well, that was before we took and I shifted off the satellite over to cell.
Yes. But the frequency ranges we use for basic things today was absolutely unheard of in World War II.
Yeah, they didn't have an oscillator that could take and set up the translation to to break it down into the audio sound.
Yes. Yet, ironically, the most used frequency range is still the same MF.
Well, when I was a kid, TVs were on VHS, VHF, and UHF. And you got three channels on VHF, maybe one on UHF.
What you talking about? You got Weird Al on VHS.
Now,
But
a brief covering. You've got MHF, HF, VHF, UHF, SHF, EHF, and they go in ranges of 3 to 30, 30 to 300, 300 to 3, 3 to 30, 30 to 300. It's that pattern going on. And I'm not going to use the little mnemonic that I used to remember it by because it is not appropriate. But it is very memorable. Um, but that is your frequency ranges and how you can easily, well, not easily remember them, but it's your sets of multiples of 10 in threes is a way to remember it as it goes up. So
when, you
UHF and
figure that
VHF. Sorry.
we had UHF transmitters, we had VHF transmitters, we had microwave transmitters, all when I was in the Navy. And the the thing is that everything still had to be encrypted because the enemy could listen to it. And
Which
we
is what made
know,
Cherokee code talkers so important back in
yes,
World War II.
yeah, and Navajo code talker,
Yeah, the
and
Navajo
the
are more
languages
well
are
known.
entirely different. Mhm. But as you take and look at the encryption, well, now we have encryption on cell phones. We have encryption in certain types of computer operations. In the civilian world. Yet, clearly, the oil industry isn't using it on their computers.
But then again, anything that can be encrypted can be hacked with a
And Russia
dedicated
is
enough
renowned for
hacker.
its hackers.
Just like Dad's connection right there.
If you know the key, it can be cracked. But if you don't have the key, it's not easy to crack in all
I
cases.
I never said it was easy to crack. I said anything that
But
can be encrypted can be hacked.
and
But
Russia is renowned for hackers.
if my understanding of it is firm enough, the military gets around this by just changing their key regularly.
Which, ideally speaking, that's what's supposed to be happening in the civilian world too, but it probably isn't.
Probably not, or otherwise they wouldn't be being held ransom by some random Russians.
Well, if you're being held ransom by some random Russians, I'm sorry, we can't do anything to help you. But if you like this episode, feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, and Leave a comment down in the comment section below.
And if you would rather us change this podcast into one about electronics and how to identify radios and possibly even fix them, we could do that technically. There is enough expertise right here.